this is not like going and getting a degree in software engineering or being a doctor or whatever, or being a school teacher. It's not that, right? I built a school to show people the thing. The purpose in the school is a compression of time. I don't know anything that you can't learn. I'm pretty sure of that, Stephen. You've done a great job today of interviewing me. You're a smart guy, right? I don't believe that I'm smarter than you. I'm just more seasoned than you on the subject. So I can just give people a compression of time. And with a compression, that's what the richest people in the world want, some compression of time.
Welcome to the Path to Passive podcast, where we talk about building wealth and empowering lifestyle through commercial real estate investing for tech professionals. I always wish that other tech professionals reaching financial freedom had documented their journey along the way, so I'm doing it for the rest of us. Join as we explore stories, many failures, and lessons learned along the way. I hope you enjoy and subscribe. Eddie, I am super excited to have you here on the show. I had such a pleasure listening to you on a couple of episodes as well. Get to learn more a bit about you. Almost 40 years into the industry, purchased over more than 40,000 notes. Of course, NoteSchool is, your baby that you have used and put together to educate others, to help them teach them about notes. And you and your executive team has bought over $3.5 billion in notes. I don't know if that's still current or if there's even more. You've talked about, things have happened and, seen more and more runaway with more and more notes and opportunity to, get those. And so I'm really excited to dive into not only what notes are, like who's the right person to get into this business, and a little bit the mechanics, strategy, and I know you got some goodies for us and the listeners at the very end too. So I'm super stoked to have you here because you talk about real estate, but also I can hear the expertise that you have in finance, and that's what this is really, really about too. So, like I said, super stoked to have you. In your words, tell us a little bit about your background. Anything else you would like to highlight for the listener to get to know you, and then we'll dive right in.
Well, if you ask me an elevator speech, what do? I buy discounted first mortgages on property, right? I don't own the property. I own the mortgage on a piece of property. Now, anybody that has a car payment or anybody that has a house payment knows you pay somebody every month that pay that debt off. I buy debt and I teach people how to buy debt, right? I've closed somewhere north of 40 or probably 50,000 notes, right? Over
Wow.
45 years, right? And so I am a note buyer. And about 25 years ago, I've started realizing that if you could teach people to do what we had learned how to do, that so many people liked it because there's a lot less aggravation in being the bank than a landlord, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of how I got started. I got started with my father-in-law when I was a very young guy at 20 years old. So now here I am, an old guy, right? But I love the business, and I teach. I teach people that somebody that wants to be somebody that's just kind of young and doesn't have a lot of financial wherewithal, and they want to be a house flipper because they're just trying to get started, right? Well, I don't teach that guy. It's not that I don't love them or don't care that they are successful. I teach people that are further up the ladder. I teach people that usually have investable capital, and and right now the market timing for our industry is really, really good. And that is because of the virus and inflation and interest rates and what all has happened. And
Sure.
you say, how can that be? Well,
Well,
go ahead.
I want to dive. We'll certainly dive into a lot of that. I want to take this a little bit from the basics, though. You talk about buying these mortgages, right? It's much easier, much better to be buying or being the bank than it is the landlord. Now,
Yeah.
your school, which we'll talk about too, is NoteSchool. So, let's break these components down a little bit for people who may not be as familiar with some of the terminology. That the mortgage is just the note, right? The note, the loan that might be on the car is just the note, right? And how else would you explain that, or what would you add on
Yeah.
top of that?
So not to get too wrapped up in all of that. A note is a promise to pay. So when you get a debt, you sign a note, and then to secure whatever you put up as collateral, a piece of property, a car, you sign another document, which a lawyer would call a security agreement. Now, in the
Mhm.
case of real estate, that security agreement is a mortgage. Well, not in every state. In Texas, they call it a deed of trust, right? In California, they call it a trustee. So but it's essentially a mortgage against the property. So I buy first mortgages, but we say I'm in the note buying business because I buy the right to receive those payments. Now,
Perfect.
all of us have been in the note business. Literally every person probably with a driver's license almost has been in the note business. At least anybody 20 years old plus. You know why?
Hmm.
Have you ever written a check?
I have, yes.
Then you were in
Uh,
the note business because a note is a check.
yeah. Can you expand on that? And I've heard
A,
part of
a
this in other
note,
podcasts. But I think it's a great example.
a note, if you wrote me a note for $1,000, you wrote me a note. Now, it's not with interest and it's not secured by real estate, but it is a note. Did you know that I could take that note and I could go to a check cashing service
Hmm.
and I could give the check cashing service, I could endorse the note over to them and they could give me less than $1,000. In other words, I could choose to take less than the full amount that is owed on the note as a payment for somebody buying my note. Check cashing service buys my check for $1,000, and maybe they only give me 900. That's a discounted note. So,
Yeah,
I buy discounted first mortgage notes secured by real estate.
yeah, it's quite an interesting concept, right? Because depending on who you ask today, they may or may not have written checks, but everyone understands the premise of checks and going someplace to get quote unquote cash a check for that same amount. But it sounds like what you're saying here too, just in this example, to expand on it a little bit, is that they really don't have to give you the same amount that's on that check. They could give you less, but they still
That's,
have that promise to go and collect on that,
they
right?
have the legal right to collect whatever's owed.
Cool.
Yeah.
So here we're talking about buying the notes or really mortgages or whatever they're called in different states, right? And so um I think what's to kind of talk more about the vehicle, right? Notes buying here too. I want to dive a little bit deeper into what you were talking about how you started. You said it was with your father or father-in-law and
Father-in-law. Mhm.
um father-in-law and um how did that what is the problem that people face, like who are the sellers, right? That how where do you get the notes from? Why is it a problem for them? Why would they transact and do business?
Okay. So I bought notes from banks, but over a long career, I bought 40 or 50,000 notes where people owner finance their property. Like, you can sell your property and you can choose to be the bank. That's more common now than it was. Why? Because of the current lending cycle that we're experiencing. So there's people are seller financing more common today because mortgage rates are high and underwriting for mortgages is really, really, really tight. So to
Mhm.
the point that the loan origination business for residential mortgages is off about 70% of what it was when it was blowing and going back in 22.
So loan origination is only 70% of what it was in 22. So a lot less loans are being made because there's more strict criteria for loans to be created.
And that's when people opt to say, well, I'll be the bank. And then they wake up and they need to cash their note in. And that's what they do. And so I deal with both individuals that would just be a regular person that just had one house and sold it and carried a note, or then I buy notes from professional real estate investors that do it over and over and over. I buy a lot more notes from real estate investors than I do from just, mom and pop that sold one property. But that's how I've done so much volume is I've built systems and processes so real estate investors can offer financing and then they can sell me the note.
Yeah, got you. So, um, since this is for people who, obviously looking at investing, I would imagine you have a much higher volume from investors as well versus the just people doing it for their own homes because, well, if it's
Yeah.
their investors, that's part of their business, right?
Yeah, I'd rather have a customer I could teach to do 100 notes than an investor that just has one note, right? So for me, it's much more scalable if I can go find a real estate investor and then where we help them create notes. We show them how to make notes. We tell them create a note to this recipe, so to speak, this underwriting box. And that way we have a lot more velocity with the notes we help them create. So it's a I, I'm the secondary market, right?
Hmm.
They create the loans and they sell them to me in the secondary market, and I represent that. I'm very much a specialist. And then what I do is I teach people how to do the business that I've done for so long, which is how to buy notes. And then I help them with things that are difficult for them to do. Like, how would I go find a note? I'd call Eddie. Eddie's bought 50,000 notes, right? He's very connected. He
Hmm.
has a seat at the table. So I've figured out that I can do things, help people along the way that go through our school to do things that otherwise it would just be difficult for them to do.
So on one group of people, you help them to learn how to create notes, and then yourself and others that you teach will also you'll teach them how to buy notes as well. So two different groups.
NoteSchool is a home for burnout landlords,
Hmm.
right? Most people that have rental properties don't love them. Now, that doesn't mean everybody, but I'm going to say 95%. They don't really love their rental houses. They're not making money. You see, what happened in the virus is you had two numbers, okay? You had rent increase and expenses increase. See, they didn't go up equally though. Rents went up about 20%, but expenses went up 60%, right?
Yep.
So now all of a
More.
sudden, people aren't making their money out of rentals. And if you're trying to buy a brand new rental, they doubled in value, but they didn't double in rent. So rent houses are not near as lucrative as they were. And so people don't, most people overall really doesn't love dealing with rental management issues, right? That's a pretty fair statement overall, correct?
Yeah, I would agree
But
with
more,
that,
but
especially
more
if they have a.
importantly, but more importantly now, they're not making near the income. In fact, let's just be honest with you, like they're not cash flowing machines. They may go up in value, but they're not cash flowing machines. So let's just take a simple analogy. Compare a note to a rent house. Okay. You have $250,000. You want to buy something. You like real estate. So I buy a rent house in Dallas, Texas, where I live. $250,000 rent house rents for about $1,800 a month. Because of expenses, you're only going to net half of that. The other half is going to go to expenses. So of $1,800, you're going to net $900 a month. But if you bought a
Mhm.
$250,000 note, the average income that you're going to earn for that note investment is $2,700 a month. And you're going to pay a servicer $30 a month to service the loan. So you're going to net almost $2,700 compared to 900. That's a 3x. That's the
It is.
reality of
So,
business.
and so the question is, well, big picture, how does that how does that make sense? How does that work? And I
Well,
understand there's the whole school.
you're buying a note. You're buying a note secured by a piece of property, and you're getting they're making their mortgage payment to you, and their mortgage payment's $2,700 a month.
Right. So in that case of if I have $250,000 and I want to go buy a single family home that I turn into a rental, then you were saying that in example, someone would only be paying the $1,800 or so, and half of that, the 900 or so, would be cash flow. But of course, that doesn't subtract what might be for improvements or for capital expenditures or that stuff later on too, which would make that less. But in this case, you're talking about if you had $250,000 and you were going to, learn from you in the school, note school, for going to buy notes, then you could be upwards, or you could be around $2,700 instead. Um, how is that possible? Like, is it
Well, I
just the type
mean,
of?
your audience, they have a mortgage payment.
Mhm.
They know they write a check every month to the mortgage company. They know what that payment is. Part that didn't include taxes and insurance. That's just money the mortgage company is holding on your behalf. Like they're holding at in escrow. We're not talking about taxes and insurance payment. We're talking about people write a check to the mortgage company or to the bank every month. Well, I own a mortgage on a piece of property, and so instead of them paying the First National Bank, they pay the First National Bank of Eddie.
Cool. So you become the bank, just like you're saying.
Yeah. And because of the market conditions, people have had a gigantic shift trying to figure out something they can do that's less headaches and better cash flow and better seeing a result of their investments. So many times people make an investment and they're years before they ever see, they say in a rent house, you know, if you paid cash for it, it takes over 20 years to ever start making any money. You just spent 20 years just to get your investment back.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, that's, but when you can earn three times the money, you can get your money back plus earn a return. And that's why people like notes. And uh, have you ever called your bank when the toilet overflowed?
No, no, you
Okay.
do not.
You
They
get
don't
the
care.
point. Yeah.
Yeah. So dealing with the termites, the trash, etc., is not something the bank has to do.
Yeah. It's an alternative investment that's different from what became more traditional alternative, which was rent houses. So it's an alternative that a lot of people didn't care about until all of a sudden all of these elements of our economy and inflation and all these things became a reality. And then they're like, hey, man, can you do something else? And I'm going, well, for 45 years now, I've been buying these notes and I wouldn't want to own a rent house. And I'm not really not kidding.
So you're talking about this number, 250,000, right? So I mean, here's the premise, right? It's you're talking about being able to get a higher return without having to do the same type of quote unquote landlord work, right?
Yes.
Awesome, absolutely. And that makes a lot of sense because what's great about that is I get these questions too. Hey, Steven, hey, I'm thinking about getting real estate. Should I go buy a rental? Should I get an Airbnb? Something like that. Um, all different types of questions. But this is, well, how much time do you really want to spend on this? Right? How much headache do you really want on this if you're so focused on other things? And so, um, tell me about the type of work that might be required after you buy a note, and there's a loan servicer as well. Like, what do they do? How do you manage this portfolio, so to speak?
The odds are if you have a mortgage on your house, you're paying a loan servicer.
And
So you're making a check. That may not be who owns your note, but the servicer is a third party company that services mortgages. So with that,
Mhm.
then you then that's exactly what you do. You you have a servicer. They are responsible to not only collect the payment and forward the payment on to you. They have compliance. They have to make sure that they account for the loan correctly, that they send the proper tax forms at the end of the year to show the interest has been paid. They probably keep the taxes and insurance up. So all of those things, really, you're just hiring out the loan administration side of the business. You're getting mailbox money, so to speak. Now, the question is, what happens if a deal goes bad?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Sure.
And I live in Dallas, Texas. I bought notes in at least 40 states, probably closer to 50. Just kind of lose track, right? And so there is a vendor network that do the things that you don't want to do. So if I have a deal that goes bad, and it's, call that 2 to 3% chance of 100 notes, you might see two of them that had a problem, right? Well, I don't go fly out there and go work the property, and I don't go stop by Home Depot and get a bunch of contractor bags. I hire a vendor that does all that. I hire somebody to go sell it. I hire somebody to, like, all of those things become, just like a mortgage. Like, the president of the bank's not out there cleaning out a foreclosed house, right? He hires somebody to go do it. Probably a bank employee's not doing it. So
Right.
we teach people kind of risk management strategies that are the most successful in the things that we've experienced over time. Let me give you kind of a summary. I'm at a real estate event this week. Very, very high end, um, realtors, investors, very, very, very seasoned, and I'm teaching them my special business, right? So they're all real. They're probably some of the biggest realtors in your town that are at this event, right? So here's the thing. Uh, I can own 55 rentals or 1,000 notes. So I'm not saying it's nothing. If I owned 1,000 notes, it probably takes up a good bit of my time. But if I own
Mm-hmm.
55 rentals, it probably takes up a lot of my time, right? So to give you a comparison, I said that to this group, all super seasoned, all super seasoned. That made perfect sense to them. They agreed with that. So I think that's a fair number. What's the labor factor? 1,000 notes versus 55 rentals.
Well, if you're outsourcing, if you've hired someone else and you're thinking like a bank and you're thinking like an owner, then it would be pretty low. Similarly, it would be if you're hiring out a property management, well, might be a little bit higher touch because you still would have to make sure you're managing the manager. And so I suppose that's the question: how much management
Most
of the loan
people that
servicer?
have experience hiring property managers don't give me a glowing report.
Yeah, exactly.
So it sounds like it's labor free, but I don't know people that report back to me. Oh, and by the way, here's another thing. You never want somebody to default, right? I always want somebody to be successful and pay their loan off. I get what I wanted, and they got what they wanted, right? That's always the mission.
Yep.
But that mortgage that I paid $250,000 for, that house is probably worth 350.
Mm-hmm.
So there is an equity cushion that is a way above what I paid for the loan. And then we teach all this, right? That's why we have a school. We go through a lot of examples and people see real deals and real examples. But on the surface, let me ask you this, Stephen. Would you like less headaches?
Absolutely.
Okay. Would you like more cash flow?
You know it, Eddie.
Would you like a higher return than what you're currently investing in?
All day,
Would you
every
like a
second.
risk management cushion if something went bad?
More margin, the better.
Well, you're probably going to like notes then.
Yep, it sounds like I would. It's so. Uh, I like what you did there. Um, but um, I gotta ask though. I think one of the things that usually comes to mind is you know certain investor, certain triangles, right? Other people's time, other people's money, other people's experience, what have you. And you probably, think about where this is going next is we've been talking about, well, you get a note and you hire a loan servicer so you can hire things out and other vendors to do other people's time, etc. But as it stands, it's like, sure, I could spend my 250 in capital, or I could think about where else could I get this money. So uh, who's the right person for this? Do you need to come with 250 in hand, or do you need to
No,
raise money, or
250,000 is just to compare cash flow and returns, right?
Mhm,
There are leveraging techniques with notes, like there are leveraging techniques with real estate. And we teach those really, really well. And interesting, there are ways to do these leveraging techniques so that you can do them within the framework of a self-directed retirement account, but not literally borrow money, because you don't want your retirement account borrowing money. It'll trigger a tax called UBIT,
mhm,
and you don't want that, right? So there are ways to do that we've done thousands of times, like a lot. And we teach people these techniques. I've taught for a lot of self-directed retirement account companies. In fact, I'm at this event. I told you about that, right? I'm at this
mhm.
event, and one of the companies that I actually knew some employees from the past, the owner walked up to me when I spoke yesterday, and he said, "Eddie, you are spot on." He said, "My clients love exactly what you're talking about." And I said, "Yeah, I know. I've taught for a lot of IRA companies, and it's just it's not just retirement investing, but it is a terrific retirement investment. It's a great investment anytime you do it." So yes, we teach leveraging techniques. I would say, we've had this school now almost 25 years. We pretty much know what people's objections are, what their concerns are, what their holdbacks are, and we teach that. And we don't make it a Pollyanny world. We don't act like nothing can ever go wrong, but we
Mhm.
teach also risk management. How do you limit your risk and put kind of cushion around the situation to limit what could catastrophically happen? And so I think we do pretty good with that. I made a statement to you a little earlier. Note School is kind of a home for burnout landlords, right?
Yep, you mentioned that.
Because what we find is there's a lot of people today that love their rentals less than the idea that they had before they owned them.
Yep, I understand that too.
It sounds good, right?
Mhm. It does. So, going back to that question, and you're talking about leveraging, like you said, it's, taught extensively in the school, but I just wanted to ask again, is it that someone doesn't need to come with $250,000 in their pocket? They can get started with less and
When
there's
I say
strategies.
people need investable capital,
Yeah,
Note School doesn't have a place to serve people that have no money.
totally.
It's an investment school, right?
Mhm,
So we serve people that have investable capital. What's investable capital? Well, some people have 75,000 and some people have 1,700,000.
mhm.
Okay. But we serve people that have money and want to change their financial future. They're dissatisfied with their retirement strategy. They're dissatisfied. They're tired of grinding, right? They don't want to work so hard. They don't like the market conditions, and so they're trying to reposition what they're spending time and energy working on, right? All of those things are we were so I train. I'm giving you an example. I train a lot of realtors. Now, realtors are not professionally trained in buying notes, other than me. They're not professionally trained in buying notes, and they don't particularly wouldn't call them. Most of them wouldn't call themselves, financial modeling experts, right? But you know why they like notes? Is they're comfortable with real estate. They like the cash flow, and it lets them go continue to be a realtor because they don't have to spend very much time managing this investment. That's why
Totally.
they like it. But it's also true with dentists, or it's true with, whatever. Like, it's like, those are, we do, people that you were giving me your professional background. So you got people in, big companies, and they make a lot of money. And
Mhm.
they know they've got to go take a percentage of that money and go put it out in something to build their future. They can't just go buy fancy stuff with every dollar they make. That's a bad life strategy, right? So now all of a sudden they're going to go take their high income earners, they're going to go take this money and go invest in something in it. And what I found out they don't want to do is spend every Saturday working on their investments.
That is a very, very fair statement. Absolutely. They want to go live life.
And so they like what we teach. We're very, very skilled at buying notes and teaching people how to apply it to their life. We have countless, and I literally mean countless, examples of people that came from non real estate worlds that wanted to go start buying notes. And so we became pretty good at teaching people where they know enough to make a safe investment. And we've built a lot of done for you things around that. Like, if somebody says, "Hey, I don't know that I know how to go find a note." I'm betting you may not, but I do.
So uh, I heard what you were talking about. Realtors, different groups of people here, but realtors especially too. I'm really trying to answer for my audience too is, and it sounds like we're getting to the answer here is if you're an accredited investor, this is a great place for you. It doesn't have to be 250,000, but you have to have capital to go and buy notes to actually go do something. And if you're an accredited investor, you're probably positioned well.
That's true. I don't think it's just accredited investors, but that's a decent definition. If it's accredited investor, let me say this, and some there are going to be people in your audience that this isn't going to be what they want to hear. Okay,
Say it.
commercial real estate, the timing's not good.
Mhm.
Apartments, the timing is not good. All you got to go do is do proper research, and you're going to find out really quickly that market has been sliding and there's more to slide. So I tell people, why is this better than a syndication? First of all, my market isn't declining. And second of all, you control your destiny. When you buy a note from me, Stephen, you own the note. You control the decisions that are made. When you invest in a syndication, you're betting on somebody else.
For sure.
And you may
Absolutely.
be betting on a market that's not kind to you.
So we talked a little bit about notes. We provided an example as well. Love that. And we talked about how it's actually done. This is just, a backed by real estate, a rent home, single family home. That's, where you're the bank. And you also talked a little about the opportunity of owning this in a self-directed IRA, or, it could be a Roth. It could also be something like an HSA if they have enough
Right.
cash in there too.
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So
Tax advantage account, we call them.
awesome. So any of those type of tax advantage accounts can be put on, be the buyer of a note as part of a retirement
That's right.
strategy.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Um, what else? You talked about things that are providing an opportunity around this as well. Inflation around the pandemic, other things. What other trends are you seeing where this is a great opportunity now, and maybe how far into the future do you see any kind of cycle or window?
Well, I've been in the note industry for 45 consecutive years. So I've been in it in different market timings. We've entered into a really good market timing. Think in terms of when the banks are struggling, and they really are, and when the mortgage companies are struggling, and they really are, the market shifts over to other alternatives. That's us. So we do best when the mortgage companies and the banks are not providing all the solutions. And so, you know, every down cycle scenario has been good for us. And we are in a cycle right now that the runway looks very good in front of us for quite a long time, right? Because once again, you've seen all the reports. There, it doesn't look like mortgage rates are going to change hardly any, right? Real estate is flat. I mean, in the
Hmm.
last few days, I just interviewed Darren Bloomquist, who's uh, the market data guy for auction.com. I got the 2025 forecast, which I already thought I knew, but I got him to tell me because he's really an expert. It's pretty flat. So let me ask you a question, Stephen. Is in any market turmoil, is there somebody making money?
Of course, every market.
You just got to do the right thing.
Hmm. Yeah.
Well, so this is a right thing to do when other things aren't either as safe or as advantageous.
Yeah, I think that's always a great reminder and kind of belief buster for people, you know, most people to hear again is that no matter the market, there's a strategy to accompany it, right? Like you're saying, somebody's making money. And you know, on that note, on that same kind of conversation, right? You know, that's kind of one of the belief busters, but what are some of the other things that you've heard over the last 40 years around like other objections people or maybe students might have around why not notes or why this doesn't make sense that you're like, actually, here's why it does.
Well, the objections I've heard from students that overtime, right? The
Hmm.
overtime objection was, Eddie, you taught us how to go buy notes, and then we got to go stand up a business and go find and buy notes,
Mm,
right? So one of the things that I did in trying to listen to our students thing is says, okay, what if we could offer done for you services and help you with the things that are the most difficult for them to go do, like find notes, like evaluate notes, like help the closing process, help it get it boarded with the servicer, all of those things that we have now matured and we've said, no, we can go do that. We're actually really good at it, right? I've built a team that is specialized and do it well. And so I've cut down the barriers of I can't do this because, right?
exactly.
I would say when people come to our school, look, there's always a cynic. Okay, so
Mhm.
there's somebody that doesn't like it. I just
Totally.
say, hey, man, we don't serve you. Like, that's
Yep.
okay. No hard feelings. I don't dislike you. You don't dislike me. We just don't serve you. Who do we serve well? We serve people well that want an alternative to rentals or an alternative to syndications. We serve people well that want that have money that they want to do something with and they don't know how to go do it in another alternative. We show them how to do it, and we serve them really well. And so for those reasons, like when you're saying what are people's objections and what they don't like about it, the biggest thing is they didn't want to go stand up a business. They didn't want to.
Mm,
They wanted a note buying strategy versus a note buying business.
got it. Tell me more about that because I think that's a really important thing that, yeah, tell me more about that. Like, what does that mean, a note buying business?
Okay, I own a note buying business. I got a portfolio in earlier today for $34 million. I've got an acquisition team. I've got a due diligence team. I've got an accounting team. I have a note buying business, right? I not only own a school, I own another company that we buy notes, right? That's a business. And
Hmm.
even though I hope I have the owner's role, I'm still active in the business. And so, I've been on calls today and meetings, and, I'm running a business. My wife
Exactly.
runs a note buying strategy. She buys for our self directed retirement accounts. She buys for our kids' accounts. She buys for our grandkids' Coverdale educational accounts, right? As you all of that, right? We find the note for her. We help her figure out how to get it closed. We coordinate with the closing agent. We coordinate with the servicer. We do certain things, and she's playing with the grandkids. She has a note buying strategy. That's different than a note buying business.
Right. You have ways to do the in one of the businesses you're talking about, you have the marketing there, you have people to help make sure it's a good fit, fits your buy box in this case, to
Yeah.
make sure that it's worked through with whomever the seller is, right, to actually get closed and to add to the portfolio and then managed all the way through. So getting
Right.
some of the people hired, the org structure, all the systems in place, that's the business you're talking about.
Yeah. So once again, it's, because let's get back to what people want, right? They want to feel comfortable with their investments. They don't want their investments to eat up all of their personal time, right?
Mhm.
So they don't want to fret about it. They don't want to lose sleep over it. They want to be able to go enjoy it, have the freedom and go enjoy it and go be able to do it. And so once we as a training company really analyzed, okay, we took all these surveys and worked with our students. And so when we became clear about when we could help them at a different level, then first of all, our success rate shot through the top. They didn't have to go find a note. We found a note for them. So first of all, if they had the money, they could get it deployed. They could make an investment. And secondly, then we started figuring out ways of things that we were super competent at to help them go do the things that were difficult for them to go do. And then all of a sudden they're like, man, I like this. And I'll just tell you this. I've spoken in front of audiences from coast to coast. I've had a number of people on my team that have spoke to real estate investors and realtors and you name it, coast to coast to coast, a lot over the past 25 years. I've asked this in front of hundreds, probably hundreds of thousands of investors that owned rental properties. Would you rather be a landlord or the bank? And I've
Bank.
never
Okay.
heard a room full of people that were landlords say, oh, we'd much rather be a landlord.
No, I imagine you would not. That's straight to the loony bin on that one, huh? So you have we outlined some great benefits all the way around. I mean, just that alone, like, even if you've only had one rental, would you rather be the landlord or the bank? It's pretty obvious. You don't need that much experience to see the benefit there. But I'm kind of curious. We're a little bit far in the conversation on this, but I am curious, like, why did you stay the path? Was it that, from doing this from when you were learning to begin with? Was it some
I've shifted as the market shifted. So what I'm teaching now may not be exactly what I did in different markets. After 2008, we bought a lot of non-performing notes, right? Right now, I train a lot of people how to go sell their rentals and turn them into a note. So
Mm,
owner finance your rental property. And so I gave you an investing example because as you know, in a podcast interview, you can't get too many doors open, right? If you
totally.
do, you're not fair to the audience. And I want to do a good job. I'm not trying to make this business sound Pollyanny, but I can tell
Totally.
you this, that I'm not overstating what it accomplishes, right?
Mhm.
For me, I run a note buying business. So I can tell you all I got to manage employees and it's this and it's that and it's like it's working every day, right? Now, people say I'm asked pretty frequently, Eddie, why are you still working? And the
Sure.
answer is I got crazy lucky 45 years ago and got introduced into a business that I loved and I don't feel like I wouldn't define it as work because they say if you find something you really love, you don't ever work a day in your life. Now, I don't mean that there's not moments or situations. So I'm 65 years old. I never will play that much golf. And my wife likes her yard and she loves her house and she could make a long list of things for me to do. And I suck at being a handyman. I'm a deal fixer, not a house fixer. That's the truth.
I hear that. Um, and not only that, but you can do this from anywhere, right? You said you're
I,
in Phoenix, and so you
I'm sitting in a hotel room. I'm sitting in a hotel room in Scottsdale, Arizona, at a nice resort, and I've been on meetings today. And if I slid these blinds open behind me, you'd see a beautiful set of mountains and a pretty blue sky. But the truth of the matter is, I do it from anywhere all the time, and probably 2/3 of our staff live all over the country. And
yeah, I
two,
think that's an
and all of our students live all over the country. Like, so you can do it with technology today. Like, I I can tell you with integrity, if God forbid one of our loans that we had went delinquent, we're not fixing to drive out and go look at the property. We're not fixing to grab our tool belt, right? It doesn't mean that we ignore the problem, but it just means that somebody's boots are on the ground. It's not my boots.
Yeah, I think it's an important point too because, like you're saying, one of the things that I've heard, I don't know, you've heard, I'm sure you have, is that if you're looking at buying, then do something that might be close to home, right, first, and then kind of expand from there. But in this case, it doesn't matter if you can invest all over the country, right?
Why wouldn't you just invest in the most conducive markets and live where you want to live?
Thinking of I was asking about the objections that you usually hear. Thinking of,
It's
external
too
things.
hard to learn. It's too hard to learn. Okay, let me tell you something. I assume that most of your listeners have technology. They have a iPad and a laptop and an iPhone, and I assume they have a driver's license. Okay,
Mhm.
those are things that are hard to learn.
Yeah, let alone all cloud technologies and software development. But yes,
Now,
definitely those.
the barrier to entry in doing this is learning how to do it initially. That's why I built a school, right? This is not like going and getting a degree in software engineering or being a doctor or whatever, or being a school teacher. It's not that, right? I built a school to show people the thing. The purpose in the school is a compression of time. I don't know
Mhm.
anything that you can't learn. I'm pretty sure of that, Stephen. You've done a great job today of interviewing me. You're a smart guy, right? I don't believe that I'm smarter than you. I'm just more seasoned than you on the subject. So I can just give people a compression of time. And with a compression, that's what the richest people in the world want, some compression of time.
Write checks to go faster
Yeah.
all day. Eddie, man, thank you for being here. I know you have some gifts for the listeners too. Uh,
So,
what is
so
that?
one of
Where
the
can
things,
people find you?
let's talk about that. I'm gonna give people a master class. Okay, it's not super long, probably an hour, maybe an hour and 20 minutes. Okay, what we're going to do there is we're going to pull out the old whiteboard. So we're going to pull out real deals, real examples, and we're going to we talk about financial modeling. I'm going to show you how that works. We talk about leveraging. I'm going to show you how that works. We talk about investing with retirement accounts and getting more income than you do on a rental. I'm going to show you real examples so that you can see the house with the green shutters and how you have a first mortgage on that property. You see what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Then I'm going to give your audience some really cool deliverables, like some really cool stuff that they're going to take home, like read materials and you know uh, flow charts and things that are going to show them like I can do this if Note School can help me. And then if they want to go forward, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in the class and then figure out if it makes sense. And then they just decide they want to keep doing what they're doing, then they didn't waste very much time eliminating one thing that they're not interested in. Right.
Totally.
So it's a master class, and here's how they're going to get it. It's going to be noteschool.com, NoteSchool.com/path to passive.
Perfect. NoteSchool.com/path to passive, just like the podcast.
That's it.
Perfect. And I'll make sure that is in the show notes as well. So if they're listening, they can jot that down or go directly there and they can click on that for you.
And the fun thing about it is we're going to be very engaging with them. We're going to ask them questions. We're going to find out who they are. We're going to find out what they want. When I described a lot of things I described to you today, it's because we're really listening to our audience. We're asking back from them all the time. I'm playing back what people tell us, not just what I guess is the truth. And so it'll be fun. They'll enjoy it. We want to hear their viewpoint. We want to hear their opinion. We want to see what we can help them with that what's bothering them, right? And so that'll be fun, and I think they'll like it. And if you liked a little bit of kind of some, little bit of Southern humor and a little bit of, like having fun doing something, then come to the masterclass. We'll keep doing it, I promise.
100%. You got to have fun while you're doing it. You got to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate you being here. And best of luck with the rest of the conference and enjoy that beautiful view you got.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Path to Passive. We love connecting with our listeners and those on the path to architecting their wealth and improving their lives. Feel free to let us know what topics you'd like to see in future episodes. Get in touch with us through email or Instagram. See you next week for a new episode.